Sometimes, the people who laugh at your dreams are the very ones who will come knocking, begging you to save them. But to reach that moment, I had to endure countless sleepless nights, tears that no one witnessed, and humiliations that cut deeper than any knife. They say success is the best revenge, but they never tell you about the bitter taste it leaves when your tormentor finally kneels before you, desperate and broken, asking for the mercy they never showed you. My name is Emily Carter, and at 32, I thought I had my life figured out. I lived in Cedarfield, one of those mid-sized industrial cities in the Midwest where everyone knows someone who knows you, but it's still big enough to disappear when you need to. The kind of place where old factories had been converted into trendy loft apartments, but the Rust Belt soul still lingered in the air like morning fog over the river. For the past 5 years, I'd been working as a marketing coordinator at Harrison & Blake Consulting, a firm that promised innovative solutions for tomorrow's challenges, but mostly just recycled the same PowerPoint templates for different clients. The office sat on the 12th floor of a glass building downtown, all clean lines and corporate sterility. Every morning, I'd badge in at 8:30 sharp, grab my coffee from the break room, always Maxwell House, never anything better, and settle into my cubicle with its partial view of the parking garage next door. The job paid $52,000 a year, which sounds decent until you factor in student loans, rent for my one-bedroom apartment, and the reality that everything costs more than it used to. That's why, 18 months ago, I started making candles in my kitchen. It began as a stress relief hobby, something to do with my hands while my mind unwound from spreadsheets and client meetings. I'd melt soy wax in a double boiler I bought at Goodwill, add essential oils, lavender, eucalyptus, sandalwood, and pour them into vintage teacups I collected from estate sales. What started as gifts for friends slowly morphed into a small Etsy shop, Ember and Grace Candles. Nothing fancy, just honest, handmade products with scents that didn't give you headaches. On good weeks, I'd make an extra $200. On bad weeks, maybe $50. But every dollar went straight to my student loans, chipping away at that $47,000 mountain that felt like it would outlive me. Then there was Mark Dawson, my direct supervisor and the primary reason I needed those stress relief candles in the first place. At 40, Mark had that particular brand of middle management energy, not quite important enough to make real decisions, but with just enough power to make everyone below him miserable. He wore the same rotation of 5 polo shirts, always tucked into khakis that sat a little too high on his waist. His office, a proper one with a door and everything, was decorated with motivational posters he'd probably bought in bulk from Amazon. Teamwork, spelled out in bold letters over a rowing crew. Excellence over a soaring eagle. Mark had this way of making you feel small without raising his voice. He'd lean back in his chair during one-on-ones, fingers steepled, and pick apart your work with surgical precision. Interesting approach, he'd say, which meant he hated it. Let's circle back on this. Meant you'd be redoing everything from scratch. He especially enjoyed public demonstrations of his authority, like when he made Jennifer from accounting cry during a staff meeting for forgetting to CC him on an email. I kept my candle business quiet at work. It wasn't against company policy. I'd checked the employee handbook twice. But I knew how things worked at Harrison & Blake. They wanted your soul, not just your 9 to 5. They wanted you to dream in KPIs and wake up thinking about client retention rates. A side hustle meant you weren't fully committed, that you were already 1 foot out the door. But Cedarfield was small, and secrets had a way of surfacing like bodies in the river. It happened on a Tuesday morning in November. One of those gray days when the fluorescent office lights felt especially harsh against the perpetual twilight outside. We were gathered in Conference Room B for our weekly team meeting, 12 of us crammed around a table meant for 8, the smell of burnt coffee mixing with someone's aggressive cologne. Mark was mid-PowerPoint, droning on about Q4 projections, when Karen from HR walked in with a knowing smile. She whispered something in his ear, and I watched his face transform. His eyes found mine across the table, and his lips curled into that particular smirk I'd seen him use before destroying someone. Well, he said, clicking his presenter remote to minimize the slides. Before we continue, I think we should congratulate Emily on her entrepreneurial spirit. The room shifted uncomfortably. I had no idea we had a little Martha Stewart in our midst. Emily here has been burning the midnight oil, literally, making. He paused for dramatic effect. Artisanal candles. The words dripped with contempt. Someone snickered, probably Brad from sales, who laughed at all of Mark's jokes like his promotion depended on it. Tell us, Emily, Mark continued, leaning forward with fake interest. What's your flagship scent? Desperation? Or maybe overtime orchid? More laughter rippled through the room. I mean, candles. Really? What's next? Are you going to quit and become one of those Etsy housewives? Maybe start a mommy blog about essential oils? My face burned. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, some sympathetic, most just grateful they weren't the target. My hands trembled under the table as I forced myself to maintain eye contact with him. It's just something I do in my free time, I managed, my voice smaller than I wanted it to be. Free time, Mark repeated, savoring the words. Must be nice. Here I thought you were dedicated to Harrison and Blake, but apparently you're too busy playing craft store entrepreneur. He turned to address the room. This is exactly the kind of divided attention that keeps people in. He gestured vaguely at my direction. Entry-level positions. Entry-level. 5 years with the company, and he still called my position entry-level. Maybe if you focused on your actual job instead of playing around with wax and wicks, you'd have gotten that promotion last quarter, he added, his voice carrying that false concern that made it worse than outright cruelty. But hey, we all have our hobbies. Some people collect stamps. Emily makes candles that probably smell like. He pretended to think. What's that scent called? Broken dreams. The meeting continued for another 40 minutes, but I heard nothing. My notebook remained blank while my mind raced with humiliation and rage. Every few minutes, someone would glance at me with that look, part pity, part relief, part secondhand embarrassment. After the meeting, I rushed to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall. I didn't cry. I'd learned long ago that crying at work was career suicide. Instead, I stood there, breathing hard. My hands clenched into fists so tight my nails left crescents in my palms. Sarah from marketing found me at my desk later, pretending to work on a campaign brief. He's an ass, she whispered, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Everyone knows it. Then why does everyone laugh? I asked, not looking up from my screen. She didn't have an answer for that. That night, I went home and looked at my little candle operation, the shelves I'd installed in my spare bedroom, the carefully labeled containers of fragrances, the inventory spreadsheet I maintained with more care than anything I'd ever done for Harrison and Blake. Mark's words echoed in my head. Etsy housewife. Broken dreams. I pulled up my sales dashboard. 63 orders this month. Not enough to quit, not even close. But as I started prepping that night's batch, a custom order for a wedding, actually, something crystallized in my chest. Not just anger, but something harder, more focused. I poured the wax with steady hands, watching it transform from solid to liquid, clear and full of potential. Mark thought he'd humiliated me. He thought he'd put me in my place. He had no idea what he'd actually done. He'd lit a fuse. That night marked the beginning of my double life. By day, I was the dutiful marketing coordinator, arriving early, staying late, enduring Mark's casual cruelties with a practiced smile. But the moment I crossed my apartment threshold, I transformed into someone else entirely, someone with a plan. I turned my spare bedroom into a full production facility. Every dollar from my checking account that wasn't earmarked for survival went into supplies. I bought wax in bulk from a supplier in Ohio, negotiating prices over long phone calls during my lunch breaks, hiding in my car in the parking garage. I studied successful candle brands until my eyes burned, dissecting their marketing strategies, their price points, their customer engagement tactics. My routine became mechanical, almost ritualistic. Wake at 5 a.m., pour candles for 2 hours before work. Lunch breaks spent responding to customer emails from my phone in bathroom stalls. Evenings from 6 p.m. to midnight were for production, packaging, and shipping. Weekends disappeared entirely into the business. I survived on 4 hours of sleep and gas station coffee, my hands permanently scented with lavender and vanilla despite endless washing. Mark's mockery became my fuel. Every snide comment, every public jab, every time he accidentally forgot to invite me to important meetings, it all went into the furnace of my determination. When he made jokes about my little hobby during staff meetings, I'd smile and nod while mentally calculating profit margins. When he assigned me the worst projects, the ones everyone knew were doomed to fail, I'd complete them flawlessly while simultaneously designing new product lines in my head. "You look tired, Emily," he said one morning, stopping by my cubicle with his coffee. "All that late-night candle-making catching up with you? Maybe you should focus on one thing. Jack of all trades, master of none, right?" "Just dedicated to my work," I replied, not specifying which work I meant. The truth was, I was exhausted. My social life evaporated. I canceled dates, skipped family dinners, ignored texts from friends. My sister called me a ghost. My mom worried I was depressed. But I couldn't explain the fierce joy that came from watching my sales slowly, steadily climb. From 15 orders a week to 20, 20 to 30. Each notification on my phone was a tiny victory. Proof that Mark was wrong about me. I studied the business side with the intensity of someone preparing for war. LLC formation, tax implications, wholesale pricing, SEO optimization. I joined online communities of small business owners, absorbing their experiences like a sponge. I learned about TikTok algorithms and Instagram marketing between spreadsheet updates at work. My browser history was a schizophrenic mix of Harrison and Blake client research and small business tutorials. The worst part was the loneliness. I couldn't share my small victories with anyone at work. When I hit my first $1,000 week, I celebrated alone with a gas station wine and leftover Chinese food. When a boutique in Denver placed a wholesale order for 200 candles, I had no one to tell except my cat, Milo, who seemed unimpressed. Mark, meanwhile, grew more unbearable. He'd started calling me Yankee Candle in meetings, always with that same cruel smile. He'd forward me articles about failed small businesses with subject lines like, FYI, interesting stats here. Once, he even brought in a cheap dollar store candle and left it on my desk with a note, "Some market research for you." But the numbers told a different story. My October revenue hit $3,000, November climbed to $4,500. By December, with holiday orders flooding in, I cleared $7,000, not enough to quit, not yet. But enough to know this was real, enough to know I wasn't just another Etsy housewife with delusions of grandeur. I remember the exact moment I knew I'd make it. It was 2 a.m. on a Thursday, and I was packaging an order for a customer in Portland who'd bought 12 candles as Christmas gifts. She'd left a note. "These are the most beautiful candles I've ever seen. My whole house smells like heaven. You're an artist." An artist, not a hobbyist, not a joke. An artist. I looked around my spare bedroom turned factory, at the professional label printer I'd bought with my last bonus, at the inventory system I'd created, at the business I'd built in the margins of my life. Then I thought about Mark, probably sleeping soundly in his suburban house, secure in his mediocre power, never imagining that the employee he tortured for sport was building something he could never understand. "You have no idea what's coming," I whispered to the darkness, sealing another package. No idea at all. Everything changed on a random Wednesday in February. I was in the break room, mechanically eating a sad desk salad, when Sarah burst in with her phone extended. "Emily, oh my God, is this you?" She thrust the screen in my face. "You're literally TikTok famous." My heart stopped. There it was, a video with 2.3 million views. A lifestyle influencer named Jessica Ray, with her perfect apartment and 800K followers, was showing off my candles. "Guys, I am obsessed," she gushed, holding up my signature lavender sage candle. "I found this small business on Etsy, and the quality is insane. Like, Better than any luxury brand I've tried. And look at this packaging. The comment section was exploding. Just ordered 3. The website crashed, lol. Need these now. Website crashed. I fumbled for my phone, hands shaking. My Etsy shop showed 847 notifications. Orders were pouring in faster than the system could process them. My email was having a seizure. My personal Instagram had gained 5,000 followers in 3 hours. I excused myself, claiming stomach issues, and drove home in a daze. My phone didn't stop buzzing the entire drive. By the time I reached my apartment, I had over 200 orders pending. My entire inventory, 3 months of production, sold out in 4 hours. The next 72 hours were a blur. I called in sick to work, something I'd never done in 5 years. I spent every waking moment fulfilling orders, responding to messages, desperately trying to source more supplies. My wax supplier, bless him, drove a special delivery from Columbus. I hired 2 college students off TaskRabbit to help with packaging. My apartment looked like a fulfillment center had exploded in it. The Cedar Field Gazette picked up the story. Local woman's candle business goes viral. They wanted an interview. A morning show in Indianapolis called Boutique Owners from California to New York were inquiring about wholesale partnerships. When I finally returned to work the following Monday, the atmosphere had shifted. People looked at me differently, not with pity anymore, but with something between curiosity and respect. Mark, however, was livid. "Nice of you to join us," he said when I walked in, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hope your little viral moment was worth abandoning your actual responsibilities." But his words had lost their sting. I'd made $34,000 in 4 days, more than half my annual salary in less than a week. The contrast between my 2 worlds became surreal. Days at Harrison & Blake grew increasingly absurd. Pointless meetings about marginal clients while my phone buzzed with opportunities that dwarfed anything the firm handled. I'd sit through Mark's condescending lectures about professional focus while negotiating 5-figure wholesale deals via text under my desk. March brought more growth. I incorporated as an LLC, hired a part-time assistant, and rented a small warehouse space in the Arts District. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was now CEO of my own company, while being treated like an intern at my day job. The breaking point came during a company-wide meeting in April. The senior partners announced that Harrison & Blake had lost its biggest client, Mitchell Industries, to a competitor. Hiring freeze, bonus cancellations, potential layoffs. The room felt like a funeral. Mark, trying to maintain authority despite the chaos, decided to use me as an example. "This is why we need full commitment from everyone," he announced. "No distractions, no side projects. Emily, for instance, needs to decide if she's a marketing coordinator or a," he paused for effect, "candle hobbyist." I felt every eye in the room turn to me. 6 months ago, I would have shrunk into my chair. Instead, I stood up. "Actually, Mark, I'm a CEO," I said, my voice carrying across the silent room. "My company hit 6 figures in revenue last quarter. We have wholesale accounts in 14 states. But you're right about one thing. I do need to make a choice." His face went through a spectacular range of colors. Red, white, purple. "Sit down, Emily. This isn't—" "I'm giving my 2 weeks' notice," I continued, pulling the resignation letter from my bag. I'd been carrying it for a week, waiting for the right moment. "Effective immediately." The room erupted in whispers. Mark's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Someone, I think it was Brad, actually applauded before catching himself. As I walked out of that conference room, leaving behind 5 years of small humiliations and smaller paychecks, I heard Mark's voice crack as he tried to restore order. "Well, good luck with that. We all know these internet fads don't last. You'll be begging for your job back within 6 months." I didn't turn around. I had 400 candles to ship by Friday and a meeting with Target's regional buyer on Monday. The fad, as it turned out, was just getting started. Freedom tasted like lavender and success smelled like money. Real money. Not the scraps Harrison & Blake had thrown my way. Within a week of leaving, I signed a lease for a 3,000 square foot production facility and hired 3 full-time employees. My days were 16 hours of pure adrenaline, but every minute belonged to me. The Target deal went through, then Nordstrom, then a boutique hotel chain that wanted custom scents for their properties. My little kitchen experiment had become Ember and Grace, a legitimate brand with a trademark, a business attorney, and a CPA who laughed when I showed him my projections. "These numbers are conservative," he said. "You're thinking too small." 6 months after my dramatic exit, I opened our flagship store in Cedar Field's renovated River District, right between a Tesla showroom and a James Beard-nominated restaurant. The grand opening was everything teenage me had dreamed about. Champagne, local press, a line of customers wrapped around the block. The mayor showed up for the ribbon cutting. The same gazette that had written a tiny blurb about my viral moment now ran a front-page feature. From corporate dropout to million-dollar CEO. The store was gorgeous, exposed brick, copper fixtures, custom scent bar where customers could create their own blends. I'd hired a designer from Chicago who transformed my vision into something that looked like it belonged in Soho. Every detail was intentional, from the recycled packaging to the locally sourced labels. This wasn't just a candle store, it was an experience. Sarah from my old job came to the opening. So did a handful of other former colleagues, their congratulations mixed with barely concealed envy. "I always knew you'd make it," they said, rewriting history with every word. Brad, who'd laughed the loudest at Mark's jokes, asked if I was hiring. "I've always been interested in entrepreneurship," he claimed, as if I'd forgotten every time he'd called my business cute. But Mark didn't come. Of course he didn't. I heard about Harrison and Blake's continued decline through the Cedar Field grapevine. They'd lost 2 more major clients. The senior partners were fighting. There were rumors of a merger, which in corporate speak meant someone was buying the carcass. Mark had survived the first round of layoffs, but barely. Sarah told me he'd been moved to a shared office, the ultimate corporate humiliation. Meanwhile, Modern Entrepreneur magazine wanted to do a profile. From side hustle to 7 figures, the Ember and Grace story. The photographer spent 3 hours getting the perfect shot of me in the warehouse, surrounded by thousands of candles ready to ship. They wanted the American dream angle. Woman escapes corporate drudgery, builds empire from nothing. I gave them what they wanted, though I made sure they mentioned Mark's mockery. Professional revenge, served with a smile. The universe has a sense of humor, though. The magazine hit stands the same week Harrison and Blake officially announced bankruptcy. 3 decades of innovative solutions reduced to a liquidation sale. The building management company put up a banner advertising vacant office space where the Harrison and Blake logo used to be. I was in my office above the store, reviewing expansion plans for locations in Columbus and Chicago, when my assistant knocked. "Emily, there's someone here who says he knows you. Mark Dawson, he doesn't have an appointment, but he's insisting." The name hit me like cold water. "Mark, here, in my building." "Should I tell him you're busy?" she asked. Reading my face, I stood, smoothing my dress, a designer piece I'd bought to celebrate our first million in revenue. The same week, ironically, that I'd paid off my student loans in full. "No," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "Send him up." I positioned myself behind my desk, solid walnut, custom-made by a local craftsman. The wall behind me displayed press clippings, awards, photos with influential clients. Every detail of this office was designed to project success, but I'd never imagined this particular audience. When Mark walked in, I barely recognized him. The polo shirts had been replaced by an ill-fitting suit that screamed job interview desperation. His hair was thinner, grayer. He'd lost weight, but not in a healthy way. The arrogance that had been his defining characteristic was gone, replaced by something that looked uncomfortably like fear. "Emily," he said, and even his voice was different, smaller, uncertain. "Thank you for seeing me." I didn't offer him a seat. Not yet. I wanted to feel this moment, to let it crystallize in my memory. The man who'd called me Yankee Candle was standing in my office, in my building, in the empire I'd built from the ashes of his mockery. "Hello, Mark," I said, allowing myself the smallest smile. "I heard Harrison and Blake had some troubles." He flinched. We both knew troubles was like calling the Titanic a boating incident. "That's actually why I'm here," he said, the words seemingly painful to speak. "I was wondering if we could talk about opportunities at Ember and Grace." The silence that followed was delicious. The email had arrived 3 days before Mark showed up at my door. I'd been in a production meeting, discussing our holiday collection. When my phone buzzed, the sender made me do a double take. "Men.W. Dawson, Eggmail. Com. Personal email, not corporate." That should have been my first clue. "Emily, I hope this message finds you well. I've been following Ember and Grace's incredible success. Your transformation from a side project to a major brand is truly impressive. I'm reaching out because I'm currently exploring new opportunities and believe my extensive experience in business consulting and team management could add significant value to your growing enterprise. I'd welcome the chance to discuss how I might contribute to Ember and Grace's continued expansion. Best regards, Mark Dawson." I'd laughed so hard my production manager thought I was having a breakdown. The formal tone, the corporate buzzwords, the complete absence of any acknowledgement of our history. It was perfect in its delusion. I'd shown it to my assistant, who'd never met Mark but had heard the stories. "Is he serious?" she'd asked. "Dead serious," I'd replied, recognizing the desperate polish of someone who'd sent dozens of these emails into the void. I hadn't planned to respond, but curiosity is a dangerous thing. And some part of me, the part that had spent nights crying in bathroom stalls, the part that had endured every Yankee Candle joke, wanted to see him squirm. So I'd replied with 2 words: Thursday, 2 p.m. Now here he was, fidgeting with his portfolio like a college grad at their first interview. The portfolio was new, probably purchased specifically for this job hunt. I could see the price tag's adhesive residue on the corner. "I saw the magazine article," he continued when I didn't immediately respond. "Modern entrepreneur. Very impressive. You've built something substantial." Substantial. From the man who'd called my business a hobby and playing craft store entrepreneur. "Yes," I said simply. "I have." He shifted his weight, clearly expecting me to make this easier. I didn't. "I know things ended awkwardly at Harrison and Blake," he said, the understatement of the century. "But I always recognized your potential. I may have expressed it poorly, but I was trying to push you to focus, to excel." The revision of history was breathtaking. I leaned back in my chair, ergonomic, Italian leather, more expensive than he'd made in a month at his old job. "Is that what you were doing?" I asked, my voice neutral. "Pushing me to excel." Color crept up his neck. I know my management style could be intense, but it got results. Harrison and Blake was successful for many years under that approach. Was. I emphasized the past tense. What happened there, exactly? His jaw tightened. We both knew I already knew. Bankruptcy proceedings were public record, but I wanted to hear him say it. Market changes, loss of key clients, leadership disputes. He rattled off the excuses like a practice speech. These things happen in business. They do. I agreed. Though I found that companies with positive cultures and respected leadership tend to weather storms better. But what do I know? I'm just an Etsy housewife. The words landed like a slap. His face went pale, then red. "Emily, or was it Martha Stewart wannabe? I can't quite remember. There were so many creative nicknames." He set down his portfolio, his hands visibly shaking. "I was wrong. I admit that. I was wrong about your business, about your potential, about everything. I'm here because I recognize that. You've built something I couldn't have imagined, and I want to be part of it." "What position did you have in mind?" I asked, genuinely curious about his delusion level. "Well, with my experience, I thought perhaps Director of Operations or VP of Strategic Development. I have 15 years of management experience. Managing what, exactly? I interrupted. A team you demoralized? Projects for clients who fled? A department that celebrated when you were moved to a shared office? Each fact hit him like a physical blow. Sarah had kept me well informed. I could start in a lower position, he said quickly, desperation creeping into his voice. Senior consultant, maybe, or project manager. I'm flexible. Flexible. Mark Dawson, the man whose ego had been as rigid as his tucked-in polos, was flexible. We do have one opening, I said, watching hope bloom in his eyes. Warehouse associate, night shift, $15 an hour to start. It involves packing candles, loading trucks, maintaining inventory, the kind of hands-on work with wax and wicks you found so amusing. The hope died as quickly as it had appeared. You're joking. I never joke about business. Mark, you taught me that. I stood, signaling the meeting's approaching end. But I don't think you'd be a good fit for our culture. We value respect, collaboration, and lifting each other up. None of which were your strengths. Mark's face cycled through emotions like a broken television. Disbelief, anger, humiliation, and finally, something that looked like panic. Emily, please, he said. And the word, please, from Mark Dawson's mouth was so foreign it might as well have been Mandarin. I need this. I've been unemployed for 3 months. My wife. She doesn't know how bad things are. The mortgage, the kids' college funds. I've burned through everything. He sank into the chair I hadn't offered, his carefully constructed interview persona crumbling. Do you know what it's like to be 43 and starting over? To have recruiters look at your resume and see Harrison and Blake and immediately lose interest? To watch your former subordinate become a millionaire while you can't even get a call back from a temp agency? I remained standing, looking down at him. The power dynamic reversal was so complete it felt surreal. I know what it's like to be humiliated, I said quietly. To have your dreams mocked in front of your peers. To work twice as hard for half the recognition. To cry in your car because your boss thought your ambition was a punchline. Each word made him shrink further into the expensive chair. The candle jokes, Emily, they were just office banter. I didn't mean. November 15th, I interrupted. You made me stand in front of the entire department and explain why my little hobby wouldn't interfere with my real job. You suggested I was better suited for a craft fair than a conference room. Jennifer recorded it. Would you like me to play the video? His mouth opened, then closed. He'd forgotten about Jennifer's habit of recording meetings for note-taking. December 3rd, I continued, pulling up dates I'd never forgotten. You forwarded my performance review to Brad accidentally, with your notes about how I lacked leadership potential because I was distracted by side projects. January 22nd, you told the VP I shouldn't be considered for the marketing manager position because I wasn't serious about my career. February 8th. Stop, he whispered. Please, just stop. Why? Am I making you uncomfortable? Am I being too intense? I used his favorite criticism of emotional employees. I walked to my window, looking down at the busy street below. My store's branded delivery van was pulling out, headed to fulfill orders across the state. You know what the ironic part is, Mark? If you had shown even an ounce of support, even basic human decency, I might have brought you with me. I might have remembered the few times you actually taught me something useful between all the degradation. I did teach you. You taught me that power without empathy is worthless. That managing through fear creates nothing but resentment. That punching down is the sign of a weak leader. I turned back to face him. So yes, Mark, you were instrumental in my success, just not in the way you imagined. He stood abruptly, anger finally overtaking desperation. You're enjoying this. You brought me here just to gloat. No, I said calmly. I brought you here to show you the same level of consideration you showed me, to give you exactly as much empathy as you gave your employees, to treat your dreams with the same respect you treated mine. This is vindictive, he spat, some of his old personality emerging. It's petty. Petty. I laughed, actually laughed. Petty was leaving dollar store candles on my desk. Petty was the Yankee Candle nickname. Petty was making me work weekends while you golfed with clients I'd brought in. This? I gestured to my office, my success, my empire. This is justice. He grabbed his portfolio, his face flushed with rage and shame. You'll regret this, Emily. What goes around comes around. It already did. Mark, you're standing in it. He stormed toward the door, but I had one last thing to say. Mark, I called out. He stopped but didn't turn. The warehouse position is real, night shift, $15 an hour. If you want to swallow your pride and actually work for something, the offer stands. But you'd report to Miguel, my warehouse manager, 24 years old, no college degree, and one of the best leaders I've ever met. Think you could handle that? The silence stretched between us, years of power dynamics and professional toxicity condensed into a single moment. You know what your problem is, Emily, he said, his hand on the door handle. You became exactly like me, cruel, vindictive, drunk on power. No, Mark, I replied. If I were like you, I would have hired you just to make your life miserable. I would have given you false hope and then crushed it repeatedly. I would have made you feel small every single day until you quit or broke. But I'm not doing that. I'm just refusing to save you from the consequences of your own behavior. Same thing, he muttered. No, I said firmly. It's really not. The door closed with a soft click that echoed like thunder. I stood there for a full minute, waiting for the satisfaction to hit, for the sweet taste of revenge I'd imagined during all those sleepless nights. Instead, I felt empty. Not disappointed, not guilty, just empty. I walked back to my desk and slumped in my chair. My assistant knocked gently. Everything okay? He looked pretty upset when he left. Cancel my next meeting, I said. I need an hour. She nodded and disappeared. I sat in the quiet of my success, surrounded by everything I'd built, and tried to understand why this moment felt so hollow. My phone buzzed. Sarah, texting. Heard Mark was there. Did you destroy him? I didn't respond. Destroy him? He'd already been destroyed long before he walked into my office. By the market, by his own toxicity, by the very culture he'd helped create. I'd just refused to throw him a life preserver. That night, I stood on my apartment balcony, a penthouse now, with a view of the entire city. Cedar Fields sparkled below, its lights reflecting off the river like scattered candles. The irony wasn't lost on me. I could see the dark skeleton of the Harrison and Blake building from here, empty except for the liquidation notices. I thought about calling Mark, about offering him something more than warehouse work. For exactly 3 seconds, I considered being the bigger person. Then I remembered Jennifer crying in the bathroom, Sarah's anxiety medication, the talented people who'd quit rather than endure another day under his management. My own hands, scarred from burns I'd gotten working exhausted because his criticism had made me desperate to prove myself. No. Some bridges were meant to stay burned. My phone lit up with a Google alert, another article about Ember and Grace, this one in the Wall Street Journal. The sweet smell of success, how Emily Carter built a multi-million-dollar empire. They'd interviewed business school professors, industry analysts, competitors who grudgingly admired our trajectory. Not a single mention of Mark Dawson or Harrison and Blake. They were already forgotten. Footnotes in a story that had outgrown them. I went inside and opened my laptop. There was an email from Miguel, my warehouse manager, sent an hour ago. Hey Emily, weird thing, some guy named Mark Dawson just submitted an application for the night shift position. Says he knows you. Want me to process it or toss it? I stared at the screen. Mark had actually applied for $15 an hour to pack candles. Under Miguel's supervision, my fingers hovered over the keyboard. One word would change everything. Process or toss? The power was intoxicating and terrible. I typed my response. Process it, standard interview. No special treatment either way. Because that was the difference between Mark and me. I'd give him the same chance I'd give anyone else. Nothing more, nothing less. If he could swallow his pride, if he could actually work without degrading others, if he could be a decent human being, then maybe he'd earn his $15 an hour. But he'd earn it. The next morning, I got word that Mark had withdrawn his application. Pride, apparently, was worth more than $15 an hour. He'd rather starve than pack candles for the woman he'd mocked. I wasn't surprised. Leopards don't change their spots. And Mark Dawson would rather blame the world than look in the mirror. 2 weeks later, I heard through the grapevine that he'd taken a job selling insurance in Indiana. Commission only, no base salary. His wife had started working full-time. Their house was on the market. I didn't feel joy at this news. I didn't feel anything. Really. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And I had become profoundly indifferent to Mark Dawson. Standing in my flagship store that evening, watching customers discover scents, seeing my employees help them with genuine enthusiasm, I finally understood something. The best revenge wasn't making Mark grovel. It wasn't refusing him a job or watching him fail. The best revenge was building something so beautiful, so successful, so far beyond his comprehension that his opinions simply ceased to matter. He'd called me Yankee Candle. Now I was in Nordstrom. He'd said I lacked focus. Now I had laser precision. He'd predicted I'd fail. Now I was featured in business textbooks. Sometimes justice doesn't come from the courts. Sometimes it comes from the quiet moment when you realize you no longer flinch at the mention of someone's name, when their words have lost all power to wound, when you can wish them well, or wish them nothing at all, and mean it. That's the moment you've truly won. As I locked up the store and headed home, I passed the old Harrison and Blake building. There was a new sign, future site of Ember and Grace corporate headquarters. I hadn't planned it. But when the property came up for auction, I couldn't resist. We'd gut it, renovate it, fill it with light and warmth and everything it had lacked before. Transform it from a temple of corporate misery into something beautiful. Mark would hear about it eventually. Everyone in Cedarfield would. And maybe, just maybe, he'd understand that success isn't about crushing those beneath you. It's about rising so high that they simply disappear from view. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. Have you ever had a boss who doubted you? How did you prove them wrong? I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences.